All right, well, welcome along to another episode of Sweet Tea and Coffee. Our guest is already laughing.
It's already laughing. Yeah.
We waited a while for his big moment, and then he comes in and laughs at us in the intro. Okay, well, listen up, friends. This is another episode of Sweet Tea and Coffee. And since our guest is already openly mocking us, we'll tell you that snicker that you hear in the background is Nathan Dutton. He's born in Harlingen. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but then transplanted all the way to Arkansas and then back to Texas where he belongs. And so we'll get into that with Nathan. Also, if you want to be mentioned or shouted out, a friend of the pod.
We actually did have an email come in this last week from Austin Dotson.
What up, Austin?
He had a suggestion for a guest. I'm not going to say that person yet.
Okay, cool.
Because we'll probably be bringing them in down the road, but we appreciate his suggestion.
Austin, friend of the pod. Thanks for making a suggestion.
So if you have a suggestion, I was actually just browsing through names trying to figure out who the next guests were going to be. We would love to have your suggestion on that list.
Wait, we're kind of doing the end of the show right now.
Yeah, it's okay. We can do whatever we want.
Where should they email
This is our
us
podcast.
Oh, does that mean I can start talking now?
No.
So we can do whatever we want.
We'll hold off on the email. Let's get the show
started. Let's get into the
started.
episode coming up. Stick around. Cool. So we are here with Nathan Dutton, and many of you know him. Nathan is our youth pastor, our student pastor, and has been here now. Golly, we hired Nathan during COVID, which that was a total interesting process. Anyway, we could maybe get into that, just how we even got to know you.
Yeah, you ghosted me for like 2 months.
Yeah, via Zoom screen, and yeah, well, so we'll go through that. That might be fun. But yeah, so you have been here now, coming up on
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah,
and so yeah, many of you know Nathan and his story. Nathan grew up a pastor's kid, so we'll get into that a little bit. But you mentioned just a minute ago that you're originally from Texas, born.
Yeah,
in
I mean.
Harlingen.
Like I said a second ago, I mean I don't remember it. I was like a baby.
Blake remembers that he was born here and can tell stories from.
Well, that's
infancy.
that legacy stuff.
Within the first week, I had.
They can
good
tap into their previous born in Nacogdoches ancestors.
All right,
and remember.
so what was your family in Harlingen for?
My parents were part of planting a church down in Harlingen, Texas. So.
Was that how they got started in ministry? Was as church planters?
Where did they start? They started they were at a church in Georgia, I believe, was the first church they were at.
Wow.
That's where my brother was born. But there's a lot of rough stuff going on in that church, and my dad was like, we need to leave. And so then they moved back to the DFW area, and then eventually down to Harlingen.
So is DFW where your parents were originally from? Okay.
So my parents are from like the Euless area.
Okay.
Euless-Hurst. My dad grew up in Euless. My mom grew up in Hurst.
Okay. So then they went from there, Georgia, Harlingen.
Back to DFW. And then, after Harlingen, they went back to DFW. And then from DFW, they went to Oklahoma, lived in Muskogee till I was in like 3rd grade. Yeah. And then after that, moved to Hot Springs. And so
I've been all over the place.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, from 3rd through 12th grade, I was in Hot Springs. So I mean, I grew up there.
So that's what you say. Yeah. It's funny because I had kind of the same deal. Like we were in Midland from when I was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that, all the way through almost high school. But I went to high school in DFW, but I still feel like I grew up in Midland. So that's like those formative years is where you say you. Okay, so what you said Hot Springs is where you grew up. What's it like growing up in Hot Springs? A beautiful area.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because people here go on vacation to Hot Springs.
Yeah, I love it.
And I'm like, what is there to see? It's not all that exciting. But I mean, when you grow up in a place.
I think for me, it's just different terrain.
Yeah.
You know, it's similar but different, you know. So I enjoy it as
it's honestly it's bigger than Nacogdoches, but you kind of have that same.
It's still that small town kind of feel
for sure.
to it.
Small town feel, especially because Hot Springs has a lot of like smaller areas around. Not as small, but like kind of similar how you have Nacogdoches and like Sherino or Douglas around. Like you have Hot Springs, and then there's Lake Hamilton, Lakeside, Malvern, Magnet Cove that all surrounds it. So yeah, I grew up kind of like in a smaller town that was like 20 minutes from Hot Springs.
Okay, so you grew up obviously in a family that was heavily involved in ministry, and I mean, in your early years, I mean, you moved a lot. So that, I mean, obviously you got settled. They got settled by the time you were in the third grade, you said, but you moved a lot. Take us into, that's a unique experience to grow up as a pastor's kid. Take us into what that world was like.
I mean, we were there for everything that was going on at the church growing up. My brother and I have an older brother. He's 3 years older than me. So during the summers, we would go to work with my dad, and we made these goofy. Someone found them recently, and we were dying laughing. We used to make these like goofy videos of us in the church. It was like early days of YouTube kind of stuff. It may have not been as early days of YouTube as I think, but I was probably in like 5th grade or something, and we had some sort of camcorder and would record ourselves making dumb videos, like racing trash cans down the hallways and stuff. So
like just entertaining yourselves in the summertime at the church.
It was us and other like staff kids, you know, like all of us up there during the summer, just like goofing off. And I'm sure if people watched the cameras of that, they were like, what in the world? They just let these kids go crazy. Like they let them do whatever they want. But no, lots of good memories from that, actually. Lots of fun times up there. But yeah.
So
Those are summers.
Yeah. So so obviously you spend a lot of time when you're a pastor's kid, you spend a lot of time at the church. But talk about just how the formation of your faith in that context. Cause I think that's interesting. Obviously you're around discussions about the gospel and Jesus, and you're with people all the time and worshiping, and like you see the inside world of the church, which can be scary. And so what does the formation of your faith look like in that context? And I'm not saying this is the same for every kid that grows up in a pastoral context.
I would actually, I feel like I was kind of maybe not, norm's probably not the right word, but stereotype at least. A lot of times, the PK stereotype is like, oh, there's like the rebellious kid. Like they're the worst kid, and they end up going crazy when they get older and stuff. But that was never really the case for me. I mean,
you're not crazy?
No,
just for the
I'm
record?
not.
Okay.
I'm not.
Well, good. We hired the right guy.
I didn't have crazy years. Not crazy now. So, yeah, I mean, I accepted Christ at 8, and it was genuine, and never went off the rails of any sorts like that. And my dad always, still is a huge discipler in my life from the time I was young. And but with all that, of even like I was there for everything, you also, as a pastor's kid, you kind of see some of the behind the scenes stuff of church that isn't always pretty.
Yeah.
You see people who have in their mind how they think church is supposed to be, and they see it as my church. Like I own it. I tithe, so like
right,
like I'm paying your salary, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and so saw a lot of like people not treat my dad great, and so that as I got older, that kind of put a bitter taste in my mouth for church people in general. I was still involved. I was still at everything, still did everything. But there's definitely like bitterness in my heart towards church people, because I mean, in my view, this was probably like 8th, 9th grade by this point. When I was younger, you don't pay attention to that. You don't pay attention to that. This is like 8th, 9th grade, about to go into high school. I thought, man, my friends at school, guys on my football team, while they may not live a life for Christ, but I at least know if something went down, they'd have my back. You know, where like church people, it's like they were acting like, oh, I lived this life for Christ, but when stuff went down, they stabbed you in the back. Right. You know.
Wow. So you kind of saw that then I mean, you're a student pastor now, so
yeah.
but those years and we talked about kind of those years of our lives, incredibly formative when it comes to your faith. It's like the beginning of that process where you start to ask, I think, deeper questions and you start to own things on your own. And so, you know, you're in that age and you're seeing, what do you say, like the dark side of church life? I don't know. It's kind of.
I don't want to make it seem like it's.
No, but I mean, that's reality. I don't think anybody here is shocked when we say, "Hey, church isn't perfect." You know, like nobody's going, "Really?" You know, but it's hard, and you're seeing that at a formative time in your life. Was it something that you just became aware of as you like watched mom and dad, and you were kind of like, "Man, dad's job is stressful," or, you know, I mean, what does that look like for you to start to become aware of your dad's vocation and how it was difficult?
I would say the kind of the moment that I realized, I think this was like 8th grade, I was just joking of like, someone was like, well, what does your dad do all day or whatever? 'Cause there's like a joke that pastors, they only show up on Sunday and Wednesday.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, you know, yeah. So I was joking. I was like, you know, just sleeps in his office or whatever. You know, like,
man.
And someone took that serious, went to the pastor, and then like started going to like people that were, the church wasn't elder led. There was like committees for stuff. They went to people on committees and like. Like I was like, it was a joke. What are you doing? Like, and so, anyways, like that. I think that was kind of like the first thing that I ever noticed of like, oh my gosh, I have to be super careful all the time what I say around people. So that like put up guards around church people as well. Of like, I don't want to share what's going on and stuff because once again, that like stabbing in the back, taking things instead of just like, wait, are you being serious? Which why would I be serious about that? But you know.
So that gets back to your dad at some point.
Yes, and he's like, Nathan, we need to talk. I was like, what? And I was like, I was in like 8th grade. I was crying. I was like, I'm so sorry, Papa.
You feel
like,
horrible.
Yeah. Like, and he's like, no, it's okay. Like, I just needed to know like what exactly was said and why and all that. And it ended up, you know, obviously like my dad was working. He wasn't sleeping in his office. So it was all good. But still, I've just like seeing that kind of stuff of people like quickly spreading the rumors and just like taking what an 8th grader said like as a joke.
Crazy. That's crazy.
And this was someone who was like in their 20s. Like
that should have known better.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
well, okay, so while that's going on, I mean, is there any interaction with your, let's say, growing bitterness, guardedness towards church people, and the formation of your faith? I mean, because that's still something you're in the middle of that. Did you notice any interaction between those two things?
Yeah, I would say it really started to see like my walk with the Lord really tank. Particularly, I felt called to ministry.
When was that? When did you?
End of 9th grade, between 9th and 10th grade.
My goodness, from 8th to 10th grade, you there's a lot going on.
Big years in life, Nathan. Big years. Right. Felt called to ministry, and I told God no for like a solid year, just because I said that's my dad's job. One, if I say yes to this, people are going to think, oh, he's just doing it because his dad's in it. And then on top of that, too, I was like, I don't even like church people all that much, to be honest, Lord. Like I'm all about going out for the, you know, my lost friends and getting to know them, like bringing them to you. But those that are like in the church realm, you know.
Yeah.
So really wrestled with that. So, I mean, I couldn't be obedient to the Lord and saying, all right, I'm submitting to you. I'm going to, whatever this looks like to go into full-time ministry. I don't know what avenue that's going to look like, but I'll do that. In order to say yes, I had to, you know, one, repent of the bitterness in my heart and forgive. And so that was a solid year plus wrestling for me. And then during that year, like I said, it just like spiritually really tanked. So
now how did you know that you needed to? I mean, you said I needed to repent. That seems like an interesting turn from going from seeing people try and cause harm, to your dad, to realizing, oh, actually, those are the people I need to forgive.
Right.
That's a pretty mature understanding.
Well,
how did you get to that?
The thing
point?
is I understood that even at the time, like even in 8th, 9th grade, I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I had the Holy Spirit inside of me, you know, like I was a follower of Christ. So, I believe that's the Holy Spirit working inside of me, knowing that, hey, this is what you need to do. But I was being disobedient and like, nah, I'm good. I'm not interested in doing that.
And you talked about it taking quite a bit of time for you to get to that place. What was
it? It was, I think, over a year, because the moment where I finally was like, all right, you and God, it was at a camp. And the speaker was talking about, it wasn't talking about going into ministry or anything like that. It was just of like fully submitting your life to God. And I was like, well, if I know God's calling me to do something and I'm not doing it, I'm not fully submitted. Right. So the only way I know how to describe it, and I use this term sometimes, is like crippling conviction. At the camp, I said, I feel sick and stuff, and I went and laid in my dorm room with the lights off for a solid day. Just I felt so convicted that I didn't want to go out and do anything. I just wanted to hide away, in a sense. Until, like I said, I just came to the point where, like, all right, God, you win. And I told my youth pastor, and I called my dad, and my dad's reaction was funny. He was, there was some excitement, like he was happy because, you know, I explained it all to him, and like, you know, I've been wrestling with this for a while and stuff. But then also one of the first things he said to me was like, Nathan, if there's anything else you can do inside of God's will, and like, then do it. Like, don't go into ministry. If there's anything else you can do that's inside of God's will, which at the time I was like, that's odd advice to receive right away. Yeah. But I get his point now of that, like, especially having gone to Southwestern, and, you know, you have a lot of people there that go because someone told them one time, oh, well, you have a nice speaking voice, you should be a preacher, or like, you're good with the youth, you should go. Or they have in their mind that youth ministry is, we play dodgeball every week. Like, I want to do that for my job, right? You know, and which is not what we do, people. Just in case you're wondering,
he works one day a week and plays dodgeball on the others. That's pretty sweet.
And there's a lot of people that dropped out very quickly. Was ultimately that, and so like I kind of saw that years later, but so then after that. I was like, all right, ministry, but I don't want to do youth ministry, because for that very reason of so many times people are like, oh, all they do is play games. Or a lot of youth ministries, the sad truth is, because a lot of people think that, because there are a lot
That's actually true.
There's lots of places that do that. I didn't grow up in a youth ministry that did that. I'm very grateful for that. But there's a lot around that I know did that. It was like pizza and dodgeball and basketball and and don't forget, Jesus loves you, which is great. Jesus does love you, but wait, let's expound on that. What is it? Who was Jesus? What does it mean that he loves you, and the nuances of all that, you know? So
if you've ever come into any of our student ministry environments after they've met, just take a gander at the whiteboard, and I can promise you there's a whole lot more than dodgeball going on there.
Yeah, I saw you erasing some of one yesterday that had all kinds of stuff on there. So the one in the zone, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was.
I'm sorry if I erased your whiteboard, but I totally did.
No,
And
it's
there
okay.
was all sorts
that
of
was,
stuff.
That's from
There
our
was-
last study, I think, from Revelation.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, from Revelation. Yeah. That's, yeah.
We like to ease into it with the kids. We start with Revelation.
super chill, super chill. No, I love that. But it's interesting. That's funny too, because I don't know, Blake, what your experience was, but I got the exact same advice, and from Larry, who we've talked about on this podcast before. When I kind of for the first time verbalized, I think God maybe is calling me to vocational ministry, and he was the one I went to. What do I do? How do I? And he said, run from it. And he said, go away. If you need to run as far away from that as you possibly can, and if you can't get away, then we'll have a conversation. And I was so offended by that.
Yeah.
But I think, it took a long time to kind of just to realize even what he was trying to do. And I think he was trying to do the very same thing that you're talking about, is de-glamorize it.
Right.
And really root that decision in an actual call, and not an emotional decision or an idea that this is the only way that you can serve the Lord. I mean, he saw in my life kind of this desire to serve the Lord, but didn't want me to believe that that's the only way that could happen, and wanted it to actually be rooted in call. And I think that was really important to kind of push to discern that. Sounds like that was kind of what your dad was trying to do.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
This is not glamorous. This needs to be rooted in call. So okay. So you went from Arkansas back to the DFW area to go to school, and it went to Southwestern. Yeah, right. Walk us through that.
Yeah,
a little bit.
did started my undergrad at Southwestern, and then within the first 3 months, I met Julianna.
Here we go.
Yeah, big news. And like everyone else at Bible College, we were married within. We were married within 2 years.
Is that really a thing? Like Bible college?
Oh my gosh, yes, it's a thing. If you're a single lady out there looking for a man, go to Bible college. They're all looking.
Oh my goodness, you heard it here first.
Oh man,
I did not know. I just did not know that was a.
Well, I wasn't looking. I will
Bible
say
college
that I was
reputation.
going there for school.
That's funny.
But the MRS degree is real there.
Oh my word,
Yeah.
that's funny.
It's a real thing.
Okay,
So yeah, at Southwestern, Julianna and I have a class together. Two different stories of
it always is. Two different stories.
how we met and whatnot, but I kind of want to tell my version, but I feel like she'll get mad at me, so I'm not.
Oh, then definitely
yeah.
tell your version. If it's going to get you in trouble,
Then say it on a public
say
podcast.
it on a public podcast.
All right, so my version.
Let's go.
My version goes like this: we had a class together, and we had a paper that we had to write for it. It was, what was it? Like our early Western civilization philosophy class. So it was like Aristotle and Plato, all that good stuff. First semester.
Oh yeah.
What a blast. And she skipped English 1 because she had done it in high school.
I was going to say, because she was a good student or a bad student?
No, because she was smart. I had to take English 1. But the plus side to taking English 1 is Southwestern, in classic Southwestern fashion, has their own writing format. Like there's MLA, there's all that type of format.
Southwestern?
Then there's Southwestern.
Oh,
they
my
just
word.
make their own and have a guide for you. So being in English 1, you learn that. And she didn't have to take it, so she didn't learn it, and so needed help formatting paper. So, seeing me and came chasing after me and needed help. If you can't see, I'm doing air quotes. Needed help with her paper.
Sure she did.
And I was like, hey, let's meet in the library, and you can help me with my paper.
There you go.
Yeah, and she was really coming after me. What can I say?
Man.
What a stud, right?
Yeah, I'm just
All right,
going to let you
Julian-
keep talking.
I'm going to stop there before I get myself in more trouble. But Julianna's version. I was talking in class of how we were learning formatting. She messaged me asking, hey, can you send me the Southwestern guide that y'all have been using in English 1? And I said, hey, I'll just meet you in the library.
Oh, okay.
And
See, one of those makes more sense than
Yeah.
the other to me.
yeah, one of them sounds a whole lot more true.
And then after that, helped her with the paper and stuff, and then I was like I think it was the next day or something. I was like, "Hey, I'm studying. You wanna grab some coffee at this coffee shop?" And like
Coffee.
yeah, hey, coffee is the way to go.
Coffee
on a first date.
Just
food, it's awkward when you're eating in front of a person.
No one ever had a great date over sweet tea that I've ever heard. But
I met a guy yesterday and we had tea.
Y'all had a date over sweet tea?
We went to a coffee shop.
I was going to say, you just said you met a guy.
I'm saying, not in that way. Great. Let's just shut it down now.
All right, keep going.
So yeah, I asked her if she wanted to study, and she actually was like, "Hey, I've got this thing right now." She was Julianna started off as a music major, and was singing at this select group thing that they invited her to. So I thought that was her nice way of telling me no, of like, yeah, I'm not interested. I just needed help on my paper. So I was like, okay, whatever. And so I went to the coffee shop and I was there. Then I get a text. I'm like, I finished writing my paper. So I'm packing everything up and I'm literally walking out the door and I get a text from her that says, "Hey, are you still there?" And I was like, "Yes." And she goes, "Well, if you're still going to be there, like I just finished up at this thing and I've got some homework I need to work on." I was like, "Okay, yeah, great." So I reset all my stuff up. Granted, I finished on my homework. So
did you delete your paper?
No, when she shows up, I literally for like the first 15 minutes, I'm like pretending to type on my keyboard to like act like I have stuff to do as well. But yeah, then from there, just date after date, and we were engaged in June. Oh goodness. Yeah, June. We'll say June.
Cut.
And let me look up the correct month.
He's now in trouble on two
and then
different counts.
Then a year later, we were married. So pretty quick.
Yeah,
we were
that's
married going into our junior year.
That's awesome. And then I know you spent some time at Travis Avenue,
Yeah,
doing ministry there, and then came here. Last thing I want to just kind of get into with you, because it's interesting that you guys interviewed for this job and went through kind of that whole process. Obviously, as I said at the top of the show, through COVID, which was, that just made the process strange, anyway. But then also moved during all of that and kind of went through a move and a transition is hard anyway. But then when you do that, when nobody is really hanging out with anybody, nobody's really being social, everybody's kind of guarded. And take us through what that process is like to move and relocate your life, freshly married, in the middle of a pandemic. What was that journey like?
The whole process of even getting, it all was God. First getting to Travis. I know this wasn't your question, but starting of getting to Travis, I was working at this after school program, and I got to a point where I was just miserable in it. I was so tired of it. And I specifically remember Julianna and I were sitting at Panera off of Hewlin, across from the Hewlin Mall. There's a Panera, and we were sitting by the window. And I just remember saying, "Man, I wish there was like an opening at the church or something. Like I could work with Matt Getty. He was the college pastor, or Daniel, working with the youth. If I was like, it doesn't even really have to be paid, just like something, Yeah. And just through Julianna and I talking, I've just come to the realization of I need to be faithful in what God has me in that moment. And in that moment was those kids at the after school program. So many of them came from broken homes, and just getting to love on them. And I had kids following that ask me questions about like, where does this come from? And it's like, well, God created it, Yeah. I don't know if I was really supposed to tell them that, but I didn't care. But in that Panera of coming to the moment of I need to be faithful in what God has me in this moment. And it wasn't 2 months later after that actually an opening at Travis, and the worship pastor had left recently, and Daniel, the student pastor, was filling in for the worship as well, and Julianna was on the worship team. And so he mentioned, and he's like, "Yeah, I got I got to in practice early because I got to go do the last interview for the my associate position. And Julianna was like, well, are you still taking applications? He was like, not really. And she goes, well, like, would it be okay if my like husband interviewed for this? And he was like, all right, that's fine. And so they like extended it in like an extra day, and I went in the next day and interviewed. And talking, as many of y'all got to hear Daniel preach and know that he and I are very close now. But in the moment, he told me a couple of years later, he was like, yeah, I didn't want to hire you at first. He was like, I wanted to go with someone else, but someone else convinced him of like, no, I think you need to go with this guy. So even just like that moment of once I like submitting to the Lord, and then it wasn't immediate. It was several months later, and then came to see that, the very thing that I asked for, came to be. And then leaving Travis and coming here in the middle of the pandemic and stuff was crazy because we were graduating, and my plan was already of once I graduated, start looking for something full-time because I was a part-time youth ministry associate. And so to start looking for something, and new pastor came in, and just when looking at finances and stuff, realized that there needed to be some cuts in the church. And part of that was my position at the church. And so it was the week before COVID that I was told I was being let go.
Wow. And
then I was told I was being let go. And then the next week COVID hit, and I couldn't even I needed a job.
Yeah.
We were married. We'd been married for 2 years, and I needed to help, provide for my family of 2.
Yeah.
And so, but you couldn't get a job at Walmart during that time.
Yeah.
I was applying everywhere, and I couldn't get anything. And so that was definitely a tough time for us. That window of we're trying to finish up school, just lost my job, and then pandemic hits. And so there's a lot going on during those few months. And luckily, just of like connections and people that I knew of helping get my resume out there and stuff, and that's ultimately got me connected to you, or I think Mitch, I think gave my information to you. Yep. You called me and we talked, and then like what I was saying earlier, if you ghosted me, it was like 2 months later that you called me back. But in the middle of that, there was actually I interviewed with a couple of other churches, and they seemed like their timeline was a lot faster, and they were ready. So like really, Julianna and I were focusing in on that. We were like, okay, like these other churches, Fredonia Hill, I didn't even know I couldn't pronounce Nacogdoches. I'd never heard of it before. Julianna was like, oh yeah, I think there's a school down there. Yeah. Cause she's, from Denton, so she's kind of familiar. And, Nacogdoches, Fredonia Hill we were like, man, it's like on the bottom of what we want. Yeah. Like we're not interested at all. But the ones that we were like, oh, like we really hope this pans out. And, that seemed like they had faster timelines and stuff. Cause in my mind, I want a fast timeline. Yeah. Have no job, middle pandemic. Like I'm, just graduated already at this point. And, the others just kind of fell through. And, there was one that was still on the table, but, timeline had like slowed down a ton. And, then you called me again, and that's when I think interviewed with all of y'all, like all the pastoral staff. And then at the end of that, you're like, yeah, I'll get back to you in like a couple of weeks or whatever. And then like, it was like 30 minutes later, you called me and you're like, hey, you should come down for a visit. And Julianna and I debated of like, should we even go down for the visit? Like, are we really that serious about going to Nacogdoches? Yeah. And we're like, yeah, let's just go. Like, it doesn't hurt to just go. And when we got here, and after talking with you and Lindsay, and then meeting the rest of the pastors and wives and a couple of the elders and stuff, we just knew of like, this is where we're supposed to be. And which was crazy because it wasn't necessarily what in our minds was like, oh, this is where, because we were trying to stay close to family. The other options were both of them were either close to my family or close to her family.
Right.
But just through that process of, it was definitely a hard time but just being open to what the Lord wanted for us, which was not easy, because in the middle of a pandemic and just, I had lost my job, so finances were tight and stuff. It would be much easier to stay closer to family. But like I said, when we came here, we just knew if like, this is where we're supposed to be.
I love how that connects back to what you talked about, even in wrestling with God's call in your life, that it's an all or nothing thing. It's total surrender, or it's not. And total surrender kind of means everything. And that's kind of the way that you entered into vocational ministry, is by saying to God, okay, whatever it is that you want, even if that means that I have to forgive places of hurt and step into a vocation that calls me into places that have been maybe hurtful in my life, that's still, surrendering everything is still the most important thing. Yeah. And then even coming here, you see that again. It's like, this is maybe not the place that we would even know to have on our list or whatever. And the circumstances around it sure don't seem like this would be where we would go. Yet here's the voice of the Lord maybe calling us here. And so what does this mean? It means total surrender. And I love that that's the connection point, that kind of seems to be the theme, is coming to this place of total surrender. I would love to know, just kind of capturing, just as we kind of close here, I think that there are people that come to moments of changing seasons in their life. Sometimes that is just simple life circumstances. Sometimes it's a new job. Sometimes it's a move. Sometimes it's changing, phase of life. And those changes of seasons can be hard. Those transitions can be hard, going from what you know to something maybe that you don't know. And you guys have certainly walked through that. And even still even 2 years, I mean, you're still in the midst of that changing season. What would you say to somebody that is kind of struggling in that area of the change of season? What would you say to encourage somebody that just said, man, there's just a lot new and this is different. This is a changing season in my life. How would you speak to that person?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kendall.
Thanks.
That's a great question. Just being completely honest, transparent, I think that's something that looking back, you can see where it was like, oh yeah, that's where I did that. But in the moment, like, I wrestled hard with those things. Yeah. It wasn't like I was just like Mr. Obedient. That's good. That's real. I wrestled hard with those things. Yeah. And for me, I have an amazing wife who helps remind me reminds me of, Nathan, remember God called you to ministry. Yeah. Right. And in that, you said you were going to be obedient to him no matter what. Yeah. So for me, it's continually remembering back to God's call on my life. And it's not easy. But I mean, for any believer, you've, when you say, I'm going to follow Christ with everything I have, committing the whole of your life to Christ. There you go. There's a little plug for you.
There you go.
When you say that, it's the same thing of like, no matter what, God, I'm going to trust you in the midst of the hardest times, in the midst of the darkest times. Just the other day, or literally the other day, Wednesday in youth, we went through Psalm 46, which is my favorite verse. And Psalm 46:2 specifically, it talks about, though the earth gives way and the mountains move into the sea, into the heart of the sea, I will not fear. I know my God is in control, is what it essentially goes on to say. And the psalmist, when he's writing it, he's also talking about, like, there's a battle that's coming in around them. And that's talking about it's like the earth is literally falling beneath our feet. And now it talks about even the ocean, the seas, they foam. So it's like white capping. There's no earth. We're now in the middle of the water and it's white capping. It's completely consuming us right now in this moment. It's the darkest moment. And it talks about as well of the God will be with us there come like the dawn. And so it's saying he's in the midst of the city as well. And it conveys the idea of that even in the midst of the darkest times, the darkest point of the battle, it would be the night, is what it's talking about. And but God was still in the midst of the city. He was still there in the midst. He was with them through the darkest time. And so in those times of transition, which can be some of the hardest times, and it always seems like it compounds.
Right.
Like for us, it was got let go of the job, COVID, and then even moving in COVID. Grateful to get a job during COVID, but then even moving and stuff, whole new start. We know no one coming here.
Right.
It always seems like things compound in those times, and I go back to that verse. Therefore, I will not fear, because ultimately God's in control. I've said, Lord, I'm going to trust you with my life no matter what comes my way. And I know that through the darkest time of the battle, that you're going to be there with me.
Yeah.
Because that's a promise you've given.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean the dark time goes away? No. It's still there. I still have to go through the night, but you're there in the night with me.
Yeah.
So.
Man, that's powerful. That is amazing. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think we oftentimes romanticize transition, and it's easy, hunky-dory, and particularly in a ministry context. And like the reality is, no, it's hard. It can be really, really, really hard. The thing I want to just grab from that story that I think is so important, the first thing he said, the first thing that came to mind, and I think every one of us, as we've struggled with obedience in the context of difficulty, would probably say something about this. That for Nathan, it was his wife. He had a voice in his life that reminded him of who he was in the Lord, of his call. And I just, like, as you're listening, I just would challenge you to think through that. Like, do you have anybody in your life that knows God's call in your life, that knows who you are in Him, and that will stand next to you and remind you of that in those seasons of difficulty? Because here's the deal. Every single one of us are going to have those moments where we struggle to stand in and walk in who God has called us to be. We're all going to have those challenges. Those are formative. Those are good for us. But one of the things that's so important in that is having somebody that is going to stand with you. Who is that? It doesn't have to be a spouse, but is there somebody in your life that will remind you of who you are? And all of our stories really are influenced by those people that remind us, and in different moments of different people. But if you don't have somebody like that, man, put yourself in some spaces, in some community context where those kind of relationships can develop. That's so important.
Yeah.
Nathan, man, thank you for coming and hanging out with us all the way from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And thanks for sharing your story with us. We've got more guests to come, as Blake mentioned, and keep those recommendations coming. We've kind of already said that, but if you have any recommendations or just want to tell us a story about how this podcast has maybe encouraged you, let us know at
stc@fredoniahill.org.
There it is. Friends, we will see you soon. Thanks for listening. Adios.